have confidence in government-run programs all the time. We've seen it in a lot of areas. I did a research study for Senator Dimely when he was a state senator on child abuse and runaway children. The most successful programs of helping runaway children and parents who abuse their children have been self-help programs, which required very little funding but were extremely effective. When you have your peer group within a session or within a community involvement program, you have a tremendous amount of understanding on each party's part. The same issue applies to the runaway situation, where a black grandmother in Oakland had the most successful program in the state, more successful than people with PhDs in education or in psychology or whatever the requisite requirements were to run a halfway house or a runaway house in this state. So I think that we have to continue to turn to the private sector. I think we have to continue to turn to people in general to get more of these self-help programs off the ground. I don't believe in government controlling everything. I just don't. I don't think that government is the answer to everything, nor do I think that money is the answer to everything. And that's why I said that the Chicano caucus itself is reviewing bilingual, bicultural programs, because we've heard reports that there are misgivings, that their programs aren't being successful or aren't doing the job that they were intended to do. And this transcends into any agency. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of those particular issues.
Encourage more Chicanos into the area of politics or law?
I personally serve on the Harvard Club of Southern California recruiting schedule and recruiting Chicanos specifically and Chicanas specifically into the professional fields, whether it's at institutions in California or outside of California. We are also very cognizant of supporting local school board candidates, because we feel as a caucus that that's where impact is made on a local level of policy. I'm going to be introducing my first bill in about 2 weeks, as soon as I straighten it out, which would require that all school districts members be elected by districts rather than at large. There has been no greater obstacle to minorities getting elected, and minorities include those in the poverty area who do not have the money to run for office but have a contribution to make on a local level. We've seen problems in San Jose and Sacramento and Bakersfield and Fresno. I'm speaking in Delano tomorrow. We've seen problems there where minorities, especially Chicanos, are trying to get elected to school board districts, especially in Chicano areas, and there isn't enough impetus, and the laws are, in my opinion, patently discriminatory in terms of districting. So I think that I know I may not have the support of the local school boards in the state on this bill, but I think we have to pursue with it in order to ensure that there is a representative local board. And just take a look at the Los Angeles City Board of Education. I think there are 9 members or 5 members, I can't even remember how many members there are, and they all have to run every so often over an 800-mile square area. Now that is absurd, because no one on that board is going to be responsive to any particular area. Yet if you have constituent response in a district, as we do in the legislature, you're going to be attuned to the needs of that area that you represent. And that, I think, will bring more representative government and more in line with the Baker v. Carr one-man, one-vote decision on school boards in this state. One more question. There are very few small farmers left in the state of California. Perhaps in the Midwest, perhaps in the South, perhaps in the Northwest, but in California there are very few small farmers left. We are dealing with agribusiness, and the reason I know that is because I personally went with Mr. Chavez in negotiating contracts with many of these small farmers, as they are interpreted in San Joaquin Valley newspapers. The first corporation was Tenneco, which owns and is a parent corporation for Superior Oil Corporation, which is owned by the Teamsters Pension Fund. There is also another corporation, which is a Jamara Corporation. It's a family-run business, but it is a multi-million-dollar corporation. Then there's Ernie and Julio Gallo, not the 2 nicest people you'd like to meet, but nonetheless a multi-million-dollar corporation. Madeira wine is made by Gallo. Every wine bottle that has Modesto on that label is made by Ernie and Julio. So Ernie and Julio are not small Italian farmers who work themselves up into a nice little farm that we have here, and now Mr. Chavez is trying to ruin us, all right? The lettuce industry is not a small industry. Eli Black, the man who jumped just a few weeks ago off in New York, who was the head of United Brands, which is United Fruit Corporation, which is Foster Grant Corporation, and which is Baskin-Robbins Corporation, and the fourth subsidiary of this parent corporation is a corporation called Inner Harvest, which is a lettuce-producing corporation in Salinas. You have Bud Antle Corporation, a small farmer, Mr. Bud Antle, very small farmer, yes indeed, but a multi-million-dollar corporation which was just subsidized and taken out of bankruptcy by the Teamster Pension Fund. So there is a relationship between the Teamsters Union and agribusiness in this state and Safeway stores, because one of the largest shareholders in Safeway Stores Incorporated is, you guessed it, the Teamster Pension Fund. So when you examine and sit down and talk about how we're going to solve this problem, the first problem is convincing our ex-Jesuit governor that there are no small farmers left in California. And number two, that we will forgive him for making that mistake, as all Catholics must, but in keeping with that philosophy, we have to be assured that farm workers are not going to be sold down the river again. We've had bills in every session. The Teamsters have bought off legislators in the Senate. I mean, bought them off. God willing, with Prop 9, we're going to be able to get that bill through both houses and then shove it on the governor's desk and see if he signs it. That's the way the Assembly is going to work on that bill, and that's the way we're going to have to work with agribusiness. Because the Williamson Land Act, you know what that is, don't you? If you have free land or open space land that you regard as open space land in a particular county, you don't have to pay property taxes on that land. No property taxes. There's an agreement between the state and the counties to pay for those property taxes and take care of that revenue problem. Why do you think schools and services are so poor in rural areas? Because agribusiness owns that open space land which is not subject to property taxation under the Williamson Land Act, which was developed in 1913. So if you have these facts in your head and you can shoot them off at people who continue to give you these contradictions and these fantasies that these small farmers are running around scared of a little Mexican guy, it's hard to swallow. It's hard to swallow. And I can assure you that in this issue, we're going to have a farm labor bill this session. And it's going to have to be signed by the governor, or else there's going to be at least 10,000 farm workers on the steps of that Capitol. And then we'll see if Jerry Brown remembered when he marched from Sacramento to Delano. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. Our meetings will be held Wednesdays at 2 o'clock in room LH 714. Thank you very much.
But I think the first test of how effective we're going to be is on a public employee collective bargaining bill, because that's where it's going to hurt minorities and Chicanos and blacks. So unless we fight for an affirmative action clause, that's the only way that we're going to get any compromise in terms of minorities, because you have to recall that in the last 5 years, most of the minorities have been hired. So the people who've been there for years that we've been trying to get rid of in the teaching profession that are just no good anymore are going to have seniority in a collective bargaining bill. So unless we fight for an affirmative action clause, all the Chicanos that are teaching in schools now are going to be down the river under that collective bargaining bill. Right, exactly. How you doing?
Yeah, so we will call you up.
Good.
Let's do this.